My name is Rufus P. Rutherford. I'm a storyteller, and I was born and lived most of my life in this place right around here in these parts, and I probably know more about the happenings at these springs than anyone about. Back in the old days, when I was a lad, and this here was farm country. Now, you got to remember one thing. Now, farm country is hot, dirty work. With that Florida sun blazing down at you, well, we just look forward to the weekend and a time when we could go over to Mr. Gary's Magnesia Springs just to cool off. By the time I was 16, the Springs was like a second home to me. But all that nearly ended in the summer of 1935. The Great Depression was going on, and folks all over the country were facing real hard times. Around here, we just went on like we always did, working our farms and coming to the springs on weekends and just trying to cool off. Some folks weren't as lucky as us, and they had lost their jobs and their homes or their farms, and they just sort of taken to the road. There was a lot of them this particular year, 1935, and stopping at the springs looking for either a little work or at least a free meal. Mr. Gary, he tried to always give them both if he could. Now, that summer there was a circus group who was camping by a field nearby, you know, and some said it was more of a freak show. But I like to watch them put on their acts. It only cost a few cents. And old Willie was in charge of the group. He announced the acts and he collected the money. Rumor had it he was once the president of a big company up north, but he lost everything he owned gambling on the horses and drinking. Now the fortune teller was his daughter, and the only one in their family would have anything to do with him. Seems her ma, Big Willie's wife, had taken off for greener pastures when old Willie lost all their money. Now the daughter, who called herself Madam Carey, she smoked, she drank, and never could get up before noon. She and her pa were always fighting because she never made any of those morning shows. Old Willie would start the show with his,
"Ladies and gentlemen, look at the freak."
Now, when he would tell something about each of those acts at that time, there was the awful two-headed person. The women in the crowd would gasp at the thought of giving birth to that. Then there was the poor pig girl. She couldn't say a word. She only oinked. Then you had the flower pot girl. She had flowers growing everywhere her innards were supposed to be. Then you had the tattoo girl. Her ma and pa were covered in tattoos, and when she was born, she was covered in them too. We loved to watch the midget boy eat. He always seemed to get real hungry at showtime, and old Willie would tell him to hurry up. And the more hurried, and the bigger mess he made, and the more we laughed. We just laughed. Now, it weren't till I was older, I realized that eating and making us laugh was a midget boy's act. Then we had the boxing chimp. No, Willie would offer $50, which was a real fortune back then, if you could stay for 3 minutes boxing that chimp. Most of the men and some of the boys had tried, but not a single one of them lasted for more than a minute or so before that chimp knocked them out. Then we had Princess Tiger Lily. She was a real Indian princess, and old Willie found her when her people throwed her out because she had blonde hair. Old Willie took her in and raised her as his own granddaughter. Then there was a group of brothers that were raised down in the Everglades, you know, the swamps. From the time they were babies, they had to fight off the gators or get eaten. Those boys could wrestle the biggest gators in Florida and ne'er ever get a little scratch on them.
Okay.
Then we had the strongest boy. This boy was so strong that at 3 months old, when the wagon they were riding in slipped off the road and turned over, pinning them all down in his family, well, the strongest boy picked up the wagon and he saved his ma and pa's lives. The last act was always the rubber girl. Her name was Rubber, and so her body was too. Seemed so at least, and she didn't have all the bones normal folks have. She could do all sorts of twists and flips and contortions, and me and the other boys thought that she was right cute too. Last act, old Willie would pass the hat around the crowd, hoping to collect enough money to buy their supper and maybe a little bottle of shine. Now, Madam Carey, she would tell a few more fortunes before heading to some shady spot for her afternoon laugh. Circus people. I figured I'd head out with them too, but my pa heard of my plan, and after a humping from his leather strap, I stayed behind when later that summer they took off down the dirt road.